Hi, my name is Rod Beadle, and this is my talk about my ethical journey for MPS 594, Week 7's video presentation assignment. A little background on myself. I'm a graduate student at DePaul University, and I am in the International Public Service Program. I've been married for 32 years. My wife, Sue, is a Lutheran minister. And we have two beautiful daughters, Stephanie, age 25, and Jennifer, age 20. I have been a practicing civil engineer for about 30 years, and of that 24 years, I've been the owner and director of a small consulting firm in the western suburbs of Chicago. I also do volunteer development engineering work with two organizations, one called Engineering Ministries International, and Engineers Without Borders. And I've done work with both of those organizations in developing countries throughout the world. Also with EMI, I've been a disaster response team member, primarily a water, sanitation, and hygiene or WASH specialist in response to a number of recent disasters, both man-made and natural, including the Haiti earthquake, flooding in Pakistan, cholera outbreak in Haiti, the Horn of Africa drought, Sierra Leone cholera outbreak, and most recently I was in the Philippines after the typhoon that struck in November. I'm going to diverge a little bit from the assignment in that rather than just focusing on my ethical development at DePaul, being a little bit older student, I think that I'd like to also talk a little bit about my ethical development throughout my own lifetime. We'll talk about childhood development, adulthood, the focus on marriage and family, my career as a civil engineer, and then I've lumped together overseas work and my DePaul experience in that the two of them have overlapped. I've been doing the overseas work longer than I've been at DePaul, but it's a primary reason that I did go to DePaul. And then finally we'll talk about where I would like to go next with my career and ethical development. I was born into a military family. My father was a career sergeant with the Air Force, and most of my childhood was spent living overseas in a number of different base locations, and that also involved, as with most military families, moving every 2 years. I was also brought up in a traditional Christian household, mostly influenced through my mother. We were Swedish Lutherans, still are, and both the Christian upbringing and the military lifestyle, I think, contributed to being, in our case, a very insular, close family. In MPS 594, our study of Kohlberg and the different stages of development that he identified, mostly through childhood, really resonated with me, especially stages 1 and 4. Stage 1 is centered around obedience and aversion to punishment, and it involves deference to powerful authorities. Well, in my case, again, growing up in the circumstances I did, I think those powerful authorities were represented by the family structure, religion or religious background, and especially the military environment we were in. This is also can be tied closely to deontological or Kantian ethics in that it's very focused upon duties and firm rules that apply to all of us. Stages 2 and 3 also resonated with me, and I could give good examples of my development as I got a little bit older in both of those, but stage 4 was especially relevant, I think, because stage 4 is built around an ethic or ethics built around social order. Again, from a military perspective, having grown up in that context, I think that when I developed into stage 4, along with a sense of social order in the military, you also develop a strong sense of patriotism. And while I didn't think of myself at all as a racist because the military was very integrated at the time I was growing up, what I didn't realize at the time was we really all were exposed to a very strong cultural racism, especially towards enemies of the United States, a very us versus them sort of attitude. Where Kohlberg, I think, falls short is that he seems to advocate that our ethical and moral development really matures through childhood and then sticks with us for the rest of our lives. Personally, I believe that Kohlberg's stages were very relevant in my own development, but I think there are a lot of things throughout adulthood that continue to shape our ethics and morals and change our outlook. One of the big things was marriage for me, and I'm sure it is for most people. For both my wife and I, we got married relatively young. We were both 21 years old. And we both had to move away from an individual selfish ethic towards what I would call a common good sort of ethical outlook. But it was a common good that applied really to just the two of us. Another ethical outlook I think that really applies in marriage, and something that you have to learn very quickly, is a sense of fairness. And that's hard to do in marriage because sometimes you don't both agree on what it means to be fair, and certainly not at all times do you both agree on who's going to decide what is fair and what isn't. Even more so, family had a very strong effect on my ethical evolution, because when you have children, you start to become more concerned not only with your own ethics and morals, but how do you impart those ethics and morals to your children, and how do you help them develop their own moral lessons. For my wife and I, we tried to do this through both religious and family structure. It's interesting. My kids are both pastors' kids, or PKs, and so it's a little bit harder. You're a little bit more in a fishbowl in their development. But I think that was really an important aspect of how they were brought up, was the religious background. And then an ethics of care sort of framework also really applies to family, both family and marriage, in that it's built around relationships between people. Briefly, I'll touch on my civil engineering career. I think that in MPS 594, when we talked about ethical codes, they certainly apply to civil engineering. And civil engineering is a field that you do a lot of work with the public, you do a lot of work with other businesses, and especially a lot of work with government agencies. So a lot of the things we've gone over in 594 apply to things that I deal with every day in my civil engineering career, including the example we had in class last week of the moral dilemma between whether it's appropriate for someone to take a government contract that's below a certain magical dollar amount, say $25,000, versus giving an opportunity to other people to propose on that same work. And then also, from a career perspective, we are, like lawyers and doctors, held to a separate code of ethics and separate laws that apply to us as engineers. In the state of Illinois and most states throughout the country, you're held to a higher obligation to protect the public beyond just your client. I've also lumped together overseas work and DePaul, again, because they have overlapped each other. I started the overseas work before I started the program at DePaul, but a big reason why I went to DePaul was the overseas work had developed an interest in international public service. And I think that my ethical and moral development pointed me towards DePaul. In the context of overseas work, I think it's really been great for my development that I can get beyond Kohlberg's stage 4, patriotic and culturally racist viewpoint. I've been able to do that to a certain extent by being exposed and interacting with people throughout the developing world. Also at DePaul, I felt MPS 510, or the International Dimension of Public Service, class with Dr. Tavante really helped open my eyes to a lot of that. In the fact that we all have more in common than we have differences between ourselves. I developed a much better appreciation for a communitarian ethic, one in which we're all part of one human community. And at the same time, I think my overseas work has also helped me to develop a much stronger virtue-based ethic. And this came up in MPS 511 with Dr. Ramanoff on sustainable development in NGOs. If you've seen some of my postings in 594, they've been about bribery and corruption in the developing world. And it was really there that I started to develop an interest in that and a virtue-based ethic towards why we shouldn't pay bribes and contribute to corruption. Disaster response work, again, is a subset of the overseas work, but it's quite a bit unique in that we're exposed to very vulnerable populations and people that are in their hour of greatest need. Often after a man-made or a natural disaster, people are at the lowest point in their lives. And so when you're working with people in that context, you develop a very strong sense of basic human rights that we all should share, as well as the importance of human security in the areas of food, health, water, and many other areas. Also helping me with this, developing a better appreciation of both of these human rights and human security appreciation was MPS 616, International Conflict Management, which really dealt with human security with Dr. Tavante. I also, through disaster response work, because when you do disaster response, you're really trying to bring as much aid to as many people as you can. I understand a little bit more about the utilitarian and common good approach to ethics. I don't know that I always agree that it's the best thing, even in a disaster response context, but I certainly have a strong appreciation for it. And then finally, under this subject, Vincentian values have really appealed to me. It's a big part of why I came to DePaul, and I really appreciate that the university has stayed true to those values, and unlike many other Catholic universities in the United States, maintains that as a central focus. And I see a lot of synergy between Vincentian values and the work I do overseas, including the service to the poor, partnership and emphasis on partnership and common good, and an acknowledgement of the simple dignity of all human beings, as well as an emphasis on sustainable development. So where do we go from here? Well, when I initially started the program at DePaul, I thought I wanted to be a director of water, sanitation, and hygiene efforts for an international NGO, probably a larger one that I'd worked with in the past. Most of those organizations require a master's degree, so that was part of my decision. But I really developed a lot of confidence through the program, and also and become very interested in potentially starting my own NGO or INGO upon graduation that would focus on water systems monitoring and evaluation for other NGOs. I think that the most relevant ethical frameworks that apply to this going forward, for me personally, I want to continue to develop virtue, or to stay true to virtue ethics. I want to continue to acknowledge and understand human rights and freedoms. And I especially would like to further explore the ethics of care and the importance of interpersonal relationships. So that's it. And thank you very much.